This story has been recorded at an Addictive Eaters Anonymous meeting in the UK. You can email us at contact@aeainfo.org.
Hi, my name's Odele. I'm an addictive eater. I always felt different from other people from when I was a very young child. I felt like something was wrong with me, and I think other people felt that too, because I behaved differently from other people at school. At first I was quite shy, but then I became quite cheeky and disruptive. I didn't know how to just behave myself like other children. I was always seeking attention in negative ways. I was quite clever. I didn't struggle with the work at school, so I could just get away with being a troublemaker, disrupting everyone else. I just didn't know what it meant to just sit quietly, do your homework, stuff like that were alien to me. And at the same time, I remember from a very young age feeling like I had a lot of problems. I didn't know what they were, but I definitely felt like I had a lot of problems. Life was heavy. And I'd see other children running around carefree, clearly just happily playing, and I just think, how are they doing that? And I just couldn't stop thinking. I was always thinking. Looking back, there was some things that happened to me at quite a young age. There was sexual abuse, things that shouldn't be happening, but I'm not 100% sure that was sort of everything that made me the way I was. It perhaps had a part to play, but I feel like I was probably born like this, restless, irritable and discontent. And of course I looked for things that was going to take those feelings away, and seeking attention was one of the ways I did it. But food became another way, something that just took the edge off and helped me to feel okay. I don't really remember that many food memories as a child. I come from a very large family. We have a massive kitchen and a big house, and there's always food. Food wasn't really restricted, other than things like chocolate and sweets. Everything else, nobody will bat an eyelid. You can have 10 portions if you want. No one cares. And I remember loving food, always climbing up, opening the cupboards to see what was in the cupboard. Also climbing up to get recipe books. I'd love looking at recipes of fancy cakes and thinking about how I'm going to make them. And I was allowed to make cakes, and it was very normal, actually. I would make all these treats and take them to school, and everyone would think I'm such a nice person, but I think I just wanted to eat them. And I remember the first time I became slightly aware of my weight. My grandmother made a comment. She said my bottom was getting big. And I never really thought about how I kind of looked before, and I thought, But that didn't really make me change the way that I ate. I was only about 12 anyway. When I was about 14, 15, I really started to feel like I don't know, maybe I only had the vocabulary for the first time, but I thought, I think I'm depressed, whatever that means. And I was always, like I said, looking for ways to feel better, so I was quite self-seeking. Like I wanted to meet people, I wanted to find some kind of social life, excitement. I was looking for excitement. And I was on holiday abroad, and by this time I think the food had really got a hold of me, but I didn't really know, because when you're in your own environment, things become normal. But the first time I noticed that something was wrong with my eating was when I was at my friend's house and she offered me an ice pop. And when I finished it, I went back to a freezer to get another one. And then I kept on going back to get more. And I was maybe 13 or something like that at the time. And I didn't know what it was about. I just knew that I couldn't stop getting more ice pops. And the rest of the week when I came home, that's all I wanted to eat all week. And I told my mother, something's wrong with me. I just want to eat ice pops all the time. You need to take me to the doctor. And I went to the doctor, and the doctor had no idea either. He thought perhaps I'm very thirsty. So he checked my blood sugar to see if I have diabetes, and I didn't. And he just let it go at that. But yeah, I got on closer and closer terms with food, and things in the household started to change. Whereas before, when we would buy treats for the weekend, we would buy, a packet of, let's say 12 crisps, one packet for everyone, or a packet of sweets and everyone gets a few. But what was starting to happen is we would buy 2 packets of sweets, one for Odele and one to share between everyone else. One big packet of crisps all for me and one for everyone else. When I say we would buy, it was probably me. But how come I could get away with it and not anyone else? I must have been really horrible to be around if you didn't give me what I wanted. Because, I was allowed and no one else was allowed. But I think I just did what I wanted, really. I didn't ask questions. I just said, I am having this. And anyway, I went on holiday to another country, again, looking for excitement. And I met these girls who... they drank alcohol and they talked to boys, so I wanted to hang out with them. I didn't know what drinking alcohol really does, but it sounded like fun, and I wanted fun because I felt so miserable. And so I went out with them, and they bought 6 shots of vodka, and they probably bought it to share between themselves, but I just remember I had all 6, and by the end of the night, I was a complete mess, throwing up, saying, I'm never going to drink again. And, of course, that didn't even last. On my way home, I missed my flight on purpose because of some stupid excuse that I made up. And then I got another flight, but this flight was business class, and it went through Greece. And there was a business lounge. And in the business lounge, alcohol was free. And there was a bottle of Bacardi, and next to it there was a pint glass. And I didn't know anything about alcohol at all. People in my family didn't drink. So I just filled up this pint glass with Bacardi and drank it. And I passed out on the plane before we even took off. But, that was me. As soon as I found something that I thought had the potential to change the way I felt, I just went all out. I didn't ask any questions. I didn't want to know about the risks. It didn't even occur to me. I just went for it. And at the same time, I remember while I was out there, going through different phases. I'd eat only ice cream because what's the point of eating anything else? Or the other way around, where I'd, just eat loads and loads of healthy food because I can eat more. And I met a boy. These girls introduced me to a boy while I was out there. So then I went to another country. I went to America to go and see him later in the year, and this time I was staying with a family who I didn't really know them. They were like his friends, aunt and uncle, and they went out for the day, and they said, help yourself to food from the freezer, very casually, and I thought, okay, sure, thank you. And they went out, and I sat down in front of the TV, and I took out a meal from the freezer. It was a nice pre-packaged homemade meal with chicken and side dishes. And I warmed it up, and I just ate it really casually. And then I went to the freezer, and I had a tub of ice cream. And I thought that was nice. And maybe about half an hour later, I thought, I think I'll have another one. Ate that very casually, and another tub of ice cream. And a bit later, I had another one. And a bit later, I had another one. And by the end of the day, I just had a very chill day. I didn't feel like I was stuffing my face or anything. But I just looked back, and I thought, I have had 7 full meals. And I've eaten the whole sleeve of tubs of ice cream from the freezer. I don't feel full. I don't feel sick. I don't feel weird at all. What I do feel is embarrassed. These people are going to come home soon and they're going to see. And I was probably behaving like this in my parents' house all the time, but I just wasn't aware of it because I wasn't scared of anyone. No one was going to say anything to me, and I didn't even know. I probably just came home and ate. That's probably what I did every day. But this was the first time that, the second time that it was in someone else's house, and I was just a bit more aware and a bit more embarrassed. Following on from that, so by that time I was 16 and I was just, feeling really uncomfortable in my own skin, and I started making choices in life, like I'm going to change schools, I'm going to try this, I'm going to try that. Maybe if I do this, I'll fit in. Maybe if I start smoking, I'll fit in with these cool people. And, none of it worked. Or maybe it did temporarily. I bumped into some people who went to these parties and took drugs, and I thought drugs were a terrible thing. I didn't know anything about them. But one night I went out with them, and we were in a club. I wasn't enjoying myself. My feet were hurting. I didn't like the music. I thought all the guys were ugly. And somebody put some white powder in my hand, and he said, "Lick it." So I did. I don't even know if I knew what it was. I think it shows the addict in me that I didn't really care, didn't ask any questions, I just took it. And I sat down, and just not long later, it was like a whole new light washed over everything. Things just felt wonderful. Such nice music and such nice people. I felt a real connection with everyone there, like I loved them. Even if they didn't speak English, I felt like I could understand them. I thought I understood their language. And for the first time ever, I felt something like happiness. This connection with other people. I always felt like nobody liked me, therefore I didn't like anyone, and what do people think of me? All these paranoid thoughts, and I just felt connected. I felt like any problem that I had could be solved. And actually I didn't have any problems, and I thought, wow, this is good. And immediately I wanted more. And that same night I asked the friend who gave it to me for more, and he said no. So I asked someone else, and then when I had more, I felt like I was almost going to die or something. But that didn't put me off. These people didn't want me to go out with them again because they felt like I was irresponsible. But I just found other people to go out with who went to these places because I wanted more of this feeling. And what I really loved about it as well was that when I took drugs, I didn't feel like eating. And I didn't feel like eating for like 3 days. It was awesome. And then when it wore off, I felt like I deserved to eat because now I haven't eaten for this amount of time, so I can eat guilt-free. And I would like attack my cereal and be like, this is delicious, and now I'm allowed to eat, haven't eaten. And since I discovered those parties, I had to go every single weekend. And I just started living from weekend to weekend, and in between didn't really matter. But in between I ate, but then I wouldn't eat again for a few days. And I was just in a bit of a blur. And occasionally it would come to me like, oh my God, what's my life become? Weekend to weekend, what is this? It's okay, I'll just go to another party. Are these real connections, real friendships? I don't know, just take some more. But, over time, the period of time that the drugs worked became less and less. And the period of time that it would make me not eat became less as well. First it was 3 days, then it was 2 days. Then I could even, just for fun, make myself eat when I was on it. That's the kind of addictive eater I am. Even if I've taken something, diet pills, that makes me not have an appetite, I thought, let me just try and see what it's like. And the other thing is it affected my mental health. I was going insane, completely insane. And I thought the food as well was getting worse. It was like one addiction was accelerating the other. And one night things really came to a head. I was just really, really upset, completely wasted. And I remember writing a paper, sticking it in my room, and it said, I have a drug addiction, I have a food addiction. I know it's going to be easier to quit drugs than food. And I've never said those words out loud to anyone. And even when I wrote it on the paper, I didn't really believe it. I think in the moment I did, but I quickly glossed it over because I always surrounded myself with people who did that stuff with the drugs, not with the food. I couldn't find anyone who did what I did with food. But I just, when I went to try and get help from health professionals, no one ever recognised food as an addiction or addiction being a problem, and they just brushed me off. I wasn't anorexic or bulimic in their eyes, and, as far as they were concerned, I was fine. But I knew I wasn't fine because of what was going on between my ears. My head wasn't fine. I wasn't okay with what I was doing. And so, it all got too much, and I thought, I need to move out of London. And I left London. I told my parents it was all their fault. And I went to live in a squat in Brighton, in another city. That was my idea of glamour at the time. I was 19 years old. And I moved there, and I took my box of homemade goodies with me, just in case. And that time I wasn't drinking, and I wasn't taking drugs. And I thought, why do I still feel crazy? I remember waking up very early one morning, and there was I could hear these, it was almost like someone had left the television on in my head, and they took the remote away, and I couldn't change the channel. It was like all these thoughts, but why can't I control my thinking? And I don't know what it was about, but I remember going to the doctor and saying, something's not right. And she said, so you can hear voices of people telling you what to do. And I thought, no, not that at all. It's like I was never insane enough to be called insane, but I knew that something was wrong with me. And what I didn't know is that I was actually still in full-blown food addiction at the time. I just substituted one thing for another. And I had got myself a full-time job as a chef in a restaurant. So I was the only person living in the squat with a full-time job. And now I can totally see why I did that, because it gave me guaranteed access to food, free food, which is the best for an addictive eater, anytime I wanted, and it's completely disguised, And I was just getting crazier. But I think the effects of the drugs were still in my system. Things were kind of still under control. And but then from there I went to university, and oh my God, I turned up, and this time I always felt different my whole life, but now I really felt different because I just come from a squat. I was going to study a profession, and all these 18-year-old girls had just been driven up from home with their parents who bought them linen and dishes, and I didn't even bring any linen or dishes. I had my head screwed on backwards, I was just bumbling through life, and of course I was different, if I felt different, I certainly was. And I'd lived all these lifetimes almost before even getting there. And I was a smoker at the time, and I decided to quit smoking because I didn't like the idea of only smoking a little bit. I was all or nothing, and in the profession I was going into, I knew I wouldn't be able to smoke all the time, and I would rather not smoke than not be able to smoke all the time. And so I quit smoking, and I managed to do that. And then my eating got worse. And I remember I had a set of 12 dishes, and I would go through all of the dishes, and then I'd be so embarrassed that they're all dirty, so I quickly washed them up, but then I'd start going through all of them again. And I'd eat something sweet and then something savoury. I'd buy only healthy food, but I would just eat loads of healthy food. But then when the binge would strike me, it could be middle of the night or something, I couldn't stop myself. I would just go through my housemate's cupboards. I'd take one biscuit, one rice cake, one piece of cheese, one chocolate, and hoping they won't notice. And it just my eating just was on a downward spiral from then on. I got into drinking at university as well, but again, I felt like an addict when it came to alcohol, and just different. Even though I didn't really like it, I still did it because, just in case it's going to make me feel really good. It was like my only chance. And but afterwards, I would feel dreadful the next day. I hated myself, absolutely hated myself, and hated everyone else. And I thought, I'm sure other people don't get this. I'm sure other people don't feel like the world is ending just because they went out drinking last night. They seem to be getting on with life fine. And my life became smaller and smaller. I made some friends, but then things just, didn't work out, and I ended up very lonely, living in a house with people I didn't know. And not very nice people, to be honest. And it was like my life had just narrowed down to just being all about food. And to me, in my head, it was all about food. What I didn't realise is I was still drinking, taking drugs, and looking for excitement and having one-night stands, all at the same time. All I could see was the food. The other things were things that were literally just getting me by. And I just thought, if only I could stop thinking about food. If only I could stop having to find a way of controlling my food every single day, I'd be okay, because it's just such a burden. But it was like I had to. Every day I had to work it out. How am I going to be okay around food today? And I'd go through phases, I'd be like, right, I am not going to be a fat person. I'm going to do this diet, and I'm going to do it strictly. And I would do it really strictly for 6 months. I wouldn't eat a single crumb of carbohydrates, and I'd feel so good, and I'd think, I've cracked it, I'm just going to eat like this for the rest of my life, I'll be just fine. And meanwhile, I was obviously drinking and going out, getting attention, because I'd lost weight, but I still couldn't stop eating. When I would go on a journey, I would take 1 kilo of carrots and 1 kilo of raw celery with me, because I needed my food next to me, and that was like my safety net. If I eat this, then maybe I won't eat the other stuff. And people thought I was mental. I remember turning up to this guy's house with my packet of carrots and celery, and he was like, do you want to go out and get some food? No, I want to eat this. It's like, what? I thought I was crazy. And I couldn't explain to him why I need to do it. I tried, if I don't have this, then you should see what I'm going to do. I'm going to eat 20 chocolate bars. But, things just got to a very sad place where I literally couldn't walk down the street without going into every single shop. Even if I was on a diet, I'd be looking at the chicken. I'd look at the celery. I would look at the raspberries. I'd eat all the raspberries. I'd eat a few packets of raspberries without paying for it, because what's the point? I need to eat so much. And then I started other kinds of dishonest behaviour. I'd steal other things, not just food. And I don't know why, and I don't know where it came from. I was never raised that way. I remember being really honest and having morals as a child, but it's like the addiction just stripped me of everything that meant anything. I just didn't care about anyone or anything. And I tried to get help from health professionals, from doctor, counsellor, going to the gym, being sent to a dietitian. Nobody seemed to understand me. I got some very unhelpful pieces of advice, try and cut down. Oh, just look at this plate, you should eat this much of this and this much of that. And I thought, I know, but I can't do it. And I would eat until I'd pass out sometimes, and I was just doing all kinds of things that I couldn't bear to even tell anyone that I was doing. And I thought I was the only person in the world. I'd never met anyone who even came close to doing the behaviours I did. It's okay, if I ever met anyone that really liked food, it made me really happy. But nothing like me. And I was always talking to my poor mum about it, and she would try and listen, but she couldn't help me. And she told me about a counsellor who lived in London. I was living in another city at the time. And she said, why don't you come and see her? And I'd already seen this counsellor once a year before. But in between, I felt like things were under control. And now, again, I felt like I was completely losing control. My binges were getting closer and closer together. I was going to lose the ability to diet because I had no strength left in me. I just couldn't do it anymore. I knew I was running out of willpower. And I didn't think this woman could help me at all. But I still went because I was so desperate. I just thought, just in case. I've tried everything. And when I went to see her, she told me that her cousin had tried this diet, and she mentioned the name of the 12-step fellowship for food addiction. She didn't know what she was saying to me. She thought it was some kind of diet, but I I came home and I looked it up and I saw there was meetings, and I made contact and I came to a meeting. And for the first time in my life, there was other people talking about doing the same things with food as I did, and also about the thinking, just that bordering on insanity but not being insane, and the frustration of that. And I just couldn't believe it. I cried my eyes out at that meeting, and I could see that not only were these people the same as me, they'd actually found a way out. I could see from the way they were speaking that they did not live like that anymore. They were slim, they were confident, they were able to smile, they were able to laugh at themselves, and they had a solution. And I heard the 12 steps, and it had the word God in it. Now, I had rejected. It was actually when I started taking drugs that I stopped caring about God. There was a direct correlation with me, with addiction and the loss of my spiritual life. And I just didn't care. It got to a point where I just didn't care. I thought, who cares? Let's just party. But this was the first time since I rebelled that I just wished that I believed in something, because I could see that that was part of the solution. And I went home that night thinking, okay, I'm going to pray. I'm just going to say prayers from when I was a child. And I know I don't believe in anything, but I'm just going to say it anyway, because I really want this to work. And that's how I approached the program. I could see it work in others, and I wanted it to work for me. It was like science for me. These people did this, they got better. I'm going to try this. And I remember calling up a friend and saying, I've been told if I want to get better around my food, I need to stop drinking and taking drugs. What do you think? And he was someone I used to drink and take drugs with, and he said, of course you should try it. If it doesn't work, you can always leave. And I thought, yeah, okay, fine. And that's how I approached it all. And I'm all or nothing. I thought I'm gonna do it all. And I got a sponsor. I got someone to help me, and she made some suggestions, and I followed them. And she suggested I go to more meetings, to AA meetings, and she gave me some numbers of other people to talk to. And I started praying and reading the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I thought, I'm doing quite well now. Now I'll probably be okay. And you know what? I wasn't. I thought I was then going to be able to magically maybe just eat 3 meals a day and be okay. But I'm an addictive eater, and I can't eat 3 meals a day and just be okay. That's why I'm here. If I could do that, I wouldn't need to come here. And I thought maybe with the support of the program, I would then be able to do that. But that wasn't the case for me. I remember I started a new job, and I thought, I'm really going to do well now. I'm going to contribute and learn. And there was a box of chocolate brownies in the staff room. And I thought, I just took one. And the rest of the day, I kept on going back to that box, and I couldn't stop thinking about it. And I didn't know if it belonged to somebody or if it was for everyone or not. And I was hoping somebody else would have some, so that it didn't look like it was just me that ate it all. And by the end of that day, I was so sick and tired of thinking about food. It wasn't my worst day eating. I had much, much worse days than that in eating. But I just got to a point where I had enough. I didn't want to think about it one more time. I didn't want to have one more day where I'm going to say, today I'm going to do this, this and this. And by the end of the day, by the end of the next day, failed. And I rang up my sponsor that night, and I just begged her. I said, please, just tell me what to eat tomorrow. I just didn't. I knew when I decided, I just changed my mind. And then I changed my mind again. And then before I knew it, I was back doing, what I was doing before and hating myself. So I was given some direction on what to do. And it was such a relief. And I thought, I have to kind of speak to her the next day, because I was calling it every morning. And I thought that would help, because when I talk to her, I'm going to have to tell her that I've done it. And I didn't know, but that was the day that I surrendered, because I became willing to do anything in the world to stop eating. I mean, if I didn't know what my sponsor was going to tell me. I think in my mind, I thought she was going to tell me to live on grass and banana peels. But that would have been okay for me. At that point, my desire to stop eating just became a tiny, tiny, tiny bit bigger than this really big desire that I had to eat. And that was the beginning of freedom for me. It really was. And I need to approach recovery in the same way. I need to be willing to do anything for my recovery. And it's just the willingness that's important. it's not always such drastic or dramatic things that I actually need to do, but the point is that I need to be willing to do them. And I have a lovely life today. I don't think about food all day. I don't feel like food is my biggest problem. I feel like it's the least of my problems. I have my meals, and when they finish, I don't wish there was more. I just go about doing the next thing, doing life in between meals, which I didn't really have before. And I'm able to be useful. I've got a great job. I've got a good relationship with my family as a result of doing the 12 steps. And the most rewarding thing that I have in my life today is being able to pass this message on to other addictive eaters. So it's really nice to be able to be here and to share my experience, and I hope that that can help somebody else. And I'll leave it there. Thank you.